Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host Carla Duke, and today I'm joined by Ryan Langley. Ryan is a senior game designer currently at PikPok with over 15 years experience in the industry, having worked on titles like Doomsday Clicker, Jetpack Joyride, Fruit Ninja, and Age of Zombies to name a few. Today we'll be talking about the art of game design and all the different hats a designer can wear on a game, Ryan's side hobby of preserving retro game magazine content, and managing the Sonic Hedgeblog, a place for Sonic superfans to explore everything Sonic related. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. All right, welcome Ryan to the show. Thanks for joining me.
G'day, nice to be here.
All right, so I have a bunch of questions. You have a ton of just great game design experience in the industry. You've worked on some awesome titles. So I have a bunch of interesting questions that I'd just love to pick your brain on. But just firstly, I know you've been working remotely as a game designer recently, like a lot of people working remotely. And I'd just love to know what your thoughts are on working remotely as a game designer. Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's easier? Do you think it's harder? I'd love to know just how your experience has been and what you think.
It's been an interesting one for me because I'm sort of a bit of a test case for PikPok. So like because of the pandemic and everything, and because New Zealand so PikPok's in New Zealand, they shut down. New Zealand just shut down, during the pandemic, and then it was like, oh, cool, everything's good. But that meant that now that that COVID's sort of going through stuff, we haven't done as much, like New Zealand as a whole hadn't done a lot of actual ground root sort of work to actually get that sort of stuff working. And so when I said, look, I'm going to go over to the US, and at least initially it was for 6 months, and now it's much more permanent. But at that point it was like, they really want to keep me because they like me a lot. And it's like, look, I really want to keep working with PikPok as well. I'm not really looking for jobs anywhere else, but I will try to do this. And it's been pretty good. The main issue really has been just time difference. Like right now it's 8:15 p.m. here, and it's like midday in New Zealand time. Yeah. But that has actually allowed me to sort of be a bit more on like the high level on helping people. It means I don't actually have as many meetings during the day, for example, but which means I can actually get a bit more work done. But it does mean that when there are meetings I have to be in, either we try to cram them all into the morning in New Zealand, or I end up having to just stay up a bit later, and then I'll just like sleep in the next day or something like that. But these are some of the sort of back and forth that we're sort of doing. But there's some opportunities to fix that soon too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like talking about remote work is one thing, but you can be remote at like a remote company within the same time zone. But as soon as you have remote workers in a different time zone, I feel like that's a whole different set of challenges, which is interesting. What about like documentation? Has that been more or less the same? Do you feel like communication with your team is still easy? Like, did you rely on talking to people in person to kind of share information, or has that been pretty good online?
It's definitely been like the learning process for me, because I am usually that person who would just walk over to someone's desk and just sit down and chat to them about this thing to try to get them all sort of on board. But now what it's meant for me is I need to actually just be more engaged on just, hey, I need to actually be talking on chat more and sending people the documents rather than just showing them and that sort of stuff, and just being a lot more aware of what's actually going on and that sort of stuff. And that's definitely been a learning process, and I've just been helping them going, hey, these are some of the spots that have been a bit of an issue, and we've been resolving those. So
going into more kind of detail in your role, I saw on LinkedIn you kind of credited yourself as like a UI designer and also as like a writer. And I'd love to know, just speaking about UI design, like what do you see the responsibilities of a UI designer on a game?
Well, for me, like for a UI designer, it's a lot. The part of it which I really like is that you are trying to solve that problem. Like a lot of it came down to figuring out where all the buttons are, but also like making it easy to read and solving these sorts of issues. For me, like I sort of got into UI because originally we were just a designer when I was working at Halfbrick. It was just like, yep, you're the designer, just do whatever we need to do. This was before like even UX and UI was really a thing, a specific thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually did like this test. We would do these tests every couple of weeks where we would go like, okay, this is the task. You have 2 hours to do this thing. And one of them I had was a UI one, and it was take the UI for Serious Sam 3 on the PC and make that UI for mobile.
Yeah.
And originally, like Serious Sam is like this weird, crazy, wacky game, but the UI is dead boring. Like it is almost like when you go into Half-Life and it's just a bunch of just generic texts just sort of sitting there. And I did some mock-ups of like, oh yes, let's make it cool and wacky, and here's all the buttons that would be there. And then I showed that off, and it was like, yep, no, that's exactly what you would do. That is exactly. It was like, oh, maybe I'm good at this. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of my sort of entrance into UI stuff.
Does a UI designer kind of cross over into UX? Like, do you consider because like, yeah, would you separate yourself from a UX designer, or do you see that like UI, because that's a big kind of topic of conversation, I guess, within game dev is what UI UX is, and then a UI game designer, do you see that in the same kind of field?
I see it is the same field, I feel, in a lot of cases, but it depends on how much of the implementation you're actually doing, I guess, in a lot of these instances. For PikPok, like we have UX designers, and a lot of that will be like coming up with like the general idea of where the button should be and how this should be and how like the, what functionality of that, but we're not really implementing that. We have the UI artists who are actually trying to make that look good and actually like work correctly. For me, and one of the things because of the Halfbrick stuff and now with PikPok was I can sort of be an all-rounder, and depending on whatever the project is will change. It means that maybe I'm the UI designer for Rival Stars College Football, but I am then the like level designer for Zombie Rescue Squad, or it'll be like, okay, we're going to make this very small Ready Set Golf game for Snapchat. You are the designer, so you'll make the levels, you'll figure out the UI, you'll figure out the design documentation and all that sort of stuff with like 3 or 4 other people.
Yeah, interesting. Are there any areas of design that you think you're not as competent with than, like, because game design gets lumped into all these different areas, from level design to combat design to narrative design. Is there any area that you feel like you haven't touched much, or that you know for a fact that other people would be better off kind of working in that area? I'd just love to know like how it's broken down in your mind.
For me, like definitely. Like I have done writing for games, but it's not necessarily writing a story. For example, like some of the time it was like, oh, you've written stuff, you'll write the story for this thing. And so there were like some instances where I do that for a game like Dungeon Inc. I could do that really well, because that doesn't really have like an ongoing narrative. It was I can do a writer tutorial and be funny, but an actual like ongoing arc of some sort, like that is just not my forte at all. But now we've actually got some narrative designers at PikPok who can actually do that sort of stuff. But I can then help more on the UX side, where it's like, I need you to understand what you're doing in the game, and you can help and you can help actually just make a story that is engaging in that way instead.
Yeah, like tooltips, right, for like in explaining certain systems.
Or if it's like, look, we need you to press this button, or the reason why this is going on, we need you to get tags in this and not call it level up or something like that. So little things like that, where we try to get people more engaged with what's going on. There was another thing as well. There was I don't think I haven't really done a lot of actual, not actual design, but it's more like I haven't really done a lot of actual like programming, or like, you see a lot of designers now, it's like, oh, I'll make my own little prototypes and stuff. I get so stressed out trying to code anything. I can read code, but I don't trust myself to write it at all, and it just gives me such anxiety to do that, which is why I'm just glad I can be with a bunch of people who, hey, I can make a really good design document that we will then implement and get a programmer and an artist who actually know what I'm working with and what we're trying to do. I'd love to be able to do some programming myself, but it's just not in my forte.
Do you feel like there's like an in-between nowadays with game engines like Unreal with their like blueprint system? I don't know if Unity has something similar where you're not actually getting into the code. It's just more, I don't know what they call it, visual scripting, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Like I started off my like game designing or creation through like click and play and click and create and stuff like that. Like the sort of, if this hits ground, then do this. And like that was awesome for what I needed to do, but it doesn't actually make a very good game for the most part. People have figured it out, but that's a lot of the way people have figured out how to make a good game. It's despite the fact that it's in that they've actually like done an entire weird system on top of everything else. But I think the thing for me, unfortunately, was I joined when I went to university. I went to the University of Adelaide in Australia, in South Australia, and they didn't have a game design course at the time. They had just computer science, and all the programming and so the programming or code or whatever we were doing was all like C++ and like Java or like this sort of stuff. And I must have just missed out on like Unity actually being a thing, because if I went to the Queensland University of Technology or something instead, then I would have probably been in Unity or some of this other stuff and learned that process. And so now for me, it's actually very hard to go back and do some of this stuff, because I've just not had the time to sort of, or opportunity to learn really how to get into Unity, or at least in a great big way. For like Ready Set Golf, I actually went and did some YouTube video tutorials to make a golf Unity prototype thing, but like it was like it vaguely worked enough that you could see the ball and that it would hit something, and then that would be the level. But like it was nowhere near anything that was even relatively good or useful.
It's like a proof of concept. Like that was it.
Yeah. For me, it's more like I'd actually like Photoshop stuff. I'll like do heaps of Photoshop so that I will mock up how I think this would play and then get the idea across that way.
Yeah, interesting. Like wireframes and stuff. Do you like explain your like Photoshop process for communicating a design? Like what does that look like?
A lot of it will be like coming up with like step-by-step processes of what this should sort of feel. It does help that like a lot of the games that I have worked on haven't exactly been like giant, MMORPGs or like massive first-person shooters or something like that. But I can get like the idea across in a lot of like mocking up or moving things around, and then putting them into a Google spread, a Google sheet, Google PowerPoint presentation type, Google Slides, and have that actually like go, okay, this, and this is how it will all sort of work together.
Yeah, interesting. When it comes to game design, do you have like some principles or like pillars that you stick to as, I don't know, your personal taste of what you think makes a game fun? Or I'm just trying to wonder if there's any advice for people maybe wanting to get into game design, if there's any kind of like North Star that you often find yourself referring to when it comes to like designing a game or like designing a fun experience.
Honestly, not. I can't really think of one that much. Like, it's more for me like when I am trying to, like, I've done a lot of like pitching for different ideas and stuff like that at PikPok. But a lot of the time, it's like I think this would be fun, or I've just come up with some weird idea, and then tried to get the idea across over in a PowerPoint presentation. A lot of the work is actually just like, for me, because I can't make a prototype, I need to just use my words to get the idea across in a way that seems to make sense. And I try to make at least like a case for why this might be worth making at all and stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting. I'd love to know why you got into game design, because I know you started off in QA. That's how I got my foot in the door in the industry as well, and then I pivoted to production. What was that like defining moment that made you look over at game design and want to pursue that as a career?
Well, for me, like I grew up with games. I was just a massive Sega fan, and I was just playing heaps and heaps of games, and as well as like even early on, like when I was like 16, 17, I created a website called Sonic Fan Games HQ, where people would make games and click and play and click and create and then upload it to my website. And then we would just make our own Sonic games and all this sort of stuff. So seeing where different ideas were coming from and seeing everyone just trying to make these like little games, which ultimately weren't super great, but like when you're 15, it's like, well, the hell, I just was able to make a game at all. This is fantastic. So from that, it's like, well, I want to get into games. I want to make games. I want to be just part of the game ecosphere and stuff like that. So that was like, well, what do I have to do? I'm going to go to university. Computer science is the only thing to do. Let's do that. And then for QA, I actually did go. My first job was at Chrome Studios in Australia, in South Australia. They originally had a massive studio in Brisbane. They just opened up one in Adelaide. And I was actually very lucky because a guy, Kimbo, who was the designer down at Chrome Adelaide, he went to the bank which my mum worked at, and he said he was a game designer, and my mum was like, oh, my son wants to get into video games. And so from that, I went in and did a test for a junior game designer at that studio. Didn't get that, but they said, well, but we've got a QA position that I think you'd be good for. And at that time, the Adelaide studio was probably 30 people, I think. They were working on the PSP version of Star Wars Force Unleashed. But we're all in the same room. So that meant that guys like Kimbo and everyone was just in the same room. So we're all like, it wasn't like, QA's over in some other building somewhere, which is what the Brisbane studio sort of had. We just all knew each other and we'd all just hang out, which was actually being really great because those guys that I worked with, all those guys are still a lot of them are still in the industry. Phil Mays, who was one of the programmers at Chrome Studios Adelaide, he now runs Mighty Kingdom.
Yeah.
And Kimbo works there. And all these people that I knew are like all over the place in that sort of way. So from there, actually, I unfortunately I was actually looking to just about become a design, looking to try to move into design at that studio. And then Chrome got rid of the QA people at that time. And this was like, Chrome was not doing very well after a couple of mishaps, and then it all sort of went backwards after a while. And then Halfbrick came up as an opportunity because I was actually interviewing the CEO of Halfbrick at the time. This is before Fruit Ninja was a thing, because I was running a side blog for Gama Sutra called Gamer Bytes.
Wow.
Because I was all about Xbox Live Arcade games. Like that was my thing at that time. And I was really excited about it. And at the time I was like doing weird shit, like looking at I was going through games every week, like the new games that came out on Xbox Live Arcade. And then every game needed a leaderboard, and you could go to the bottom of the leaderboard of the first stage of a game or something. And it's like, well, that's probably the amount of people who have bought the game. So I was writing like sales analysis for Xbox Live Arcade games. Like, this is how many people we think have played this game because of this and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was talking to them about their game Rascals, which was meant to be their big Xbox Live Arcade pillar. And then I put in my resume as well because I had a design position open. Yeah. And I did some tests with them over Skype at the time. And then met up with them at another little game dev meetup in Melbourne. And then they hired me.
Wow. That's
like,
crazy.
cool. But I didn't have any like real game design experience. I didn't have like, here's a demo or anything like that. It was more like, at the time, I think it was more, well, this guy seems to know a lot about Xbox Live Arcade games.
Mm-hmm.
We think that might be useful. So maybe we'll hire him for the moment.
Yeah. What was, do you remember what the like game design test was that you had to do?
It was, so they were making a game called The Blob 2. No, hold on. I think the test that they had at the time was, I think, how would you make a platformer on the Nintendo DS with only using the touchscreen, I think. But the actual concept of this, and you can talk to Dan Vogt about this, who was the lead designer at the time. He basically, the concept is that you would do this, and they'd want you to do was say, this is actually a bad idea. Because making a platformer that you can only use the touchscreen on a DS is actually not very good. You should be using the buttons to do platform. Yeah. So that was kind of their vibe.
Trick
at the
question.
Time. Yes. Because at the time they were doing DS games. It was like Avatar for the DS, Avatar Last Airbender games for the DS and stuff like that.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. That's interesting. I wonder what game design tests are like nowadays. That doesn't have to be like, yeah. Do you have any like insights on that? On if someone wanted to get a game design position, what kind of skills they would need? Or I suppose it depends on like platforms and stuff, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I think like a lot of that now is a lot more in terms of like just how you're going to fit in, or like how are you going to help like diversify a lot of stuff as well. Like we want new ideas on lots of different things, but a lot of it now can also be like, where do you think as a designer you would fit in with lots of the stuff that we've got? Because compared to when I was working at Halfbrick, it was like, well, we need people now who is like, well, how good are you at like, are you the sort of person who goes like, I love being in a spreadsheet and I can balance the fuck out of this thing, and I'm going to have like tabs a go and I can just do all this and I understand all the math and I'll have all the math that makes it work. And that's not me. And so I need someone usually who's like good at being in a balance sheet that has 100 tabs on it. And sometimes we'll need a designer that's like, or can do like, is a bit of a UX person, or is more like, I think for me, I'm more of the feel. Like they usually they'll throw me into something if they need to get the feel going on this project a bit more and stuff like that. So with the sort of interviewing people for studios, which we're trying to do a lot of that at the moment because now New Zealand's back open, so it's like, hey, we can finally get people over here. A lot of it is like how you're going to help make even crazier and better games for us. So.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, I think you've shared a lot of interesting points just on game design as like a career, and I appreciate all the info you shared. I feel like now might be a good time to pivot into everything Sonic and like retro magazine, because honestly, it's so fascinating, and I love meeting people like yourself that just have built just so like a community online. Like your the Sonic Hedgeblog Twitter, I think, has like 70K followers, and
it's just about to hit that now.
It's so fascinating. So first question I have is, have you watched Sonic 2 yet?
I have seen Sonic 2.
Okay, so you're like up to date on Sonic lore, and so that's where I was, because I was looking through the content. I feel like a lot of it is retro style, and I wasn't sure if you kind of we're keeping up to date with all the latest. Like, I don't know if are they like Sonic. Actually, this is a good question. Like, where is Sonic right now as like an IP? Like, what is being done in the space? And because I'm sure you're on top of it, if anyone is.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot going on at the moment, and it's because there's like the new games that are coming out. There's Sonic Frontiers that's coming out, I think, at the end of this year, which is like meant to be this new game. But they haven't shown much of it yet, but it looks like it's more open world, which will be okay, that's a very interesting. It's been 5 or so years since there's been like a brand new regular Sonic game, which is quite a long time for that series.
Mm-hmm.
There's Sonic Origins, which is like a remake of 1, 2, 3 and Knuckles and CD, which is great. So they'll be like widescreen and have all this cool stuff on it. So I'm excited for that too. There's meant to be a Netflix show this year called, I forget the name now, Sonic Prime. Apparently there's a movie that just came out, so that just blew up and has done very well for itself. There was apparently there's going to be like a Knuckles spin-off show, I guess, on Paramount Plus based on the movie or something like that.
Right.
And then there's also the comics. There's IDW has a whole comic series, which is fantastic as well. And so for like the Hedgeblog, sorry. Yep.
Well, it's a great time for Sonic fans right now, which is
awesome.
It
is, I think. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. And hopefully it's all positive. Like the worst timeline would have been like the original looking Sonic movie, Sonic, and stuff like that, where it would have been like, oh God, like what do we do to deserve this?
Yeah. What was your reaction when the first like Sonic like live action dropped? Because that was a whole drama, right? With them rebranding or redesigning the Sonic character. Were you kind of like on the forums like did you share everyone's like frustration? What was your like state of mind when they released the trailer?
Yeah, it was very much a frustration. It's just like, oh, of course they'd screw this up. Of course we can't have anything nice in this regard. But like also like if you look at like what Paramount had done previously, like what they had done was the Transformers films and the Ninja Turtle reboots, and those are honestly ugly and shitty, but they sold shit tons and made shit tons of money off these ugly like Transformers. Like I want the boxy robot Transformer, like Optimus Prime. I don't want weird, very tall, like too much shit on the Michael Bay Ninja Turtle sort of shit. I think they were trying to go that way with the Sonic stuff, and like, he had like just he didn't have gloves on. He just had like white like rat hands or something. And it's just like this just all feels bad. So I'm glad that it completely turned around in that way. The movies are honestly, they're fine. I'm the person who doesn't want the human stuff nearly as much. Like this is too much of it. I just don't care about whatever's going on with those people. But apparently the kids love those bits. So I don't know. It's that sort of thing. That's why I have the comics, or I have all these other things. To jump onto.
It's interesting. Like the OG Sonic fans are part of like a maturing audience, right? Like they're a lot older now, in their 20s, 30s. But then Sonic is also like a childhood IP, like for kids' toys and things like that. So it must be hard to like where to gear it. But I think there's some cool kind of like the Transformers movies. I guess they like were created for a mature audience. To appeal to them, but I feel like the Sonic movies have been kept as like a junior demographic.
Oh sure, but like they still have like hey, it's Knuckles, it's giant robots and stuff like that. It is interesting being on the Hedgeblog and what I actually do on that, and like I post heaps of GIFs, heaps of artwork, heaps of images of basically just I've got so much intel on just all that stuff just from going through it, that I just know lots of weird stuff that I liked posting about. And the Hedgehog sort of started because there's actually a Mario one called Super Mario Broth that was like really, it is huge still. And like they have like lots of like little neat details about Mario games. It's like, I know all that stuff, but Sonic, so I should do that. So that's what I've sort of been doing now. And if anything, with the diversity of Sonic stuff, like it's always been diverse, because even when in 1993, when like Sonic 2 was out and stuff like that, there was 2 completely different cartoons that were on the exact same time. And then 2 different comic books in the UK and in the US. So it's like, and they were all completely different from each other and just didn't actually care about anything that was going on. There was no brand synergy going on. It's just like, we just need something over there in that space. Go.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I had this really weird a couple months ago. I was like, there was this TV show with like musical instruments as weapons, and I was like, what is this? And it took me ages to find it, and it was Sonic Underground. And I watched
yeah,
that for like a period of my life, and it just, I don't know, it was a real cool concept, I must say, and like using the Sonic
yeah.
characters.
And even that's just I've tried like part of the hedge blog. I do try to like post lots of different things from lots of different stuff. But every time I try to go back to Sonic Underground, it's just like, oh, this sucks. I can't stand. It's got like lots of weird like visual errors in it, and then the singing is awful, and it's just like I can't even be bothered putting this stuff up in any way. But like, but I'll go through like the Adventures of Sonic. I've come to appreciate the Adventures one a bit more because it is just super wacky, and that's just what they were going for. But Underground just seemed, it was also at the weirdest time where it's like he's got a sister and a brother, and it's using this style of a Robotnik from one of the old shows, but like Sonic Adventure just came out, so this is irrelevant to anything that's going on that I want to see and stuff like that.
That's hilarious though. It's awesome that there's so many things to reference though.
Yeah.
What's like from the early days of when you started the Sonic Hedgeblog, what's like a piece of intel or like information or like an Easter egg that maybe went viral or something that you really like that you think is a good point, like reference to make of like how like the kind of information that you can capture that people can find on the Hedgeblog? Like what's something interesting that you've found and posted?
There's a whole bunch of stuff. Like a lot of it can be like when Sonic has appeared in some other game. Like there's like even just more recently, there was a game, I can't remember the name of it, but it's some weird Japanese game where you're meant to set up traps in like a shop or a house, and then burglars will try to come in, and then you need to like try to make them go into the traps and stop them from stealing everything. And one of them is a shop, and it has like a little Sonic toys in it, and there's a little Mega Drive in the corner that you can turn on, and then like a very small, probably like 8x8 pixel thing that still looks like Sonic is just shows up on a television and stuff like that. It's like lots of that sort of stuff. Or if anything now, it's like trying to go, oh, there's stuff which people don't remember now got so old, like the Archie comics or the British comics that were like pretty big over there, but like never came over somewhere else. And so trying to find what people are into. One thing that is interesting, what you were talking before of like different ages of people, is that a lot of the stuff which actually does do really well on that are things from like the PlayStation 2 era. But that's because their first console was probably a Sonic Hero. The first game they had was Sonic Heroes on their PlayStation 2 or GameCube. So they don't actually care about like the older stuff like at all. Or it's people who the game Sonic Rivals which was a PSP game, or Sonic Rush that were Nintendo DS games, for a lot of people were the games which that was their first game. So they love those games. But and so those will actually go up pretty well because there's a lot of those people in their early 20s who grew up on that stuff that are now nostalgic for that Sonic. So when they go like, let's make a new Sonic game, there's absolutely no way to like
cater to
keep everyone happy because every game has been so dramatically different.
Yeah. That's so interesting. One question I have is what's your view on memes? Because I feel like, do you draw a line in the sand where, because there's a ton of Sonic meme content out there, but I feel like the Hedge blog doesn't really, like, that's not really an area that is of interest. Like, what are your thoughts on like memes and just Sonic in terms of internet culture and its presence there?
Yeah, like for me, like what I wanted out of the Hedge blog was, I sort of also started the Hedge blog a bit because there was a lot of meme content out there of Sonic stuff. There's some really good ones, like the No Context Sonic Twitter account is really good, but there's a lot of them which are much more like grotesque, or the YouTube poop stuff, and all that stuff. And that's fine. Like that stuff can exist because there's a lot of fun stuff to make fun of in this thing. But what I wanted to sort of do is like, I just want to post positive things.
Yeah.
Like I want the stuff which I like and that was fun or interesting, and not the like the stuff that's like shitting on this or that or and that sort of thing. Obviously, that sometimes is a bit hard. Like, and especially like I could make some more meme content, and I very rarely have I. And so like one of the I think the most popular thing I ever posted on the Hedgeblog was a very quick edit I did of the new Sonic from the movie using a baseball bat to hit the old looking Sonic. Like, oh, I can't. He's like, oh, I can't with that guy. Bam.
Yeah.
And that got like 80,000 like retweets and blogs and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, look, I know that stuff is good. I know that I would get way more prominence if I did more meme stuff, but I just don't want to. I don't want to make myself miserable doing that.
Yeah. It's like day trading on the stock market when you're trying to make memes and like be current. It's an exhausting. Whereas I feel like you're more OG, you're more respectful of the IP and the history, and it's important that you have those people as well.
Yeah, I just want it to be positive. I want like the positive vibes of whatever sort of coming up.
Yeah,
and like I would avoid like the 2006 Sonic, for the most part, because I never actually had played it really, and it is a bad game. But there are some, like, I'm now going like, well, there's actually some little like some good like visual aesthetic stuff which is in there sometimes. So I'll grab some of that, but generally try to avoid it. Or it's like the 5% at the bottom of this giant Google Doc that will randomly choose stuff for me to like post every day.
Yeah. Well, I noticed there's a new feature on Twitter that says it's automated by Rland2, which is your page, and I'd never noticed that before, and I wonder why it says, or like how is it automated? Like how does that process work?
So it's a thing which Twitter has now added, which they says like, hey, if you are a bot, then you need to put your name. You need to say this is a bot and this is botted by someone. So I just added that to my own account. Originally, what I had was actually using a Tumblr, and the Tumblr was just a giant queue that I had made that I would like randomly, I would put in an order of something, and I would just go, yep, that's fine, and then it would just post 2 times a day. But what I've done now is I found a way to make a Twitter bot through Google Sheet. So I've actually got a Google Sheet now that has multiple different categories of things that'll have what the game is about. It might be like TV show stuff or Mega Drive stuff, or maybe it's T-shirts or something like that. And it will just randomly choose one of them, use the string that I put in there, use the artwork that I've got, and then just post those twice a day. And then so then I don't have to care about, I can just put like, cool, I'm gonna make 50 GIFs of this one game. And I don't have to fiddle around with a draft queue or something like that. I'll go, let's just go, just figure it out. So that's really fun. That's why I've made other different blogs in that same way. I've done a Sega one, a Nintendo one, a PlayStation one now, PlayStation Park.
Wow.
Which was just like, I like making GIFs just generally. And so I was able, and with that bot, originally I could only do like 3 megabyte GIFs. But then it got up to 5 megabytes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I can actually make some good PlayStation ones now. And that then got me into weird shit like all these different fighting games and stuff that have like automated like computer versus computer fighting. So I can make GIFs of cool stuff because I'm really bad at fighting games and stuff like that.
Fascinating. That's like a whole, I wanted to talk about like all the other different like blogs that you do, and the I don't know what you call it. I've called it like preserving retro game magazine content. Like you pull the like ads and the assets from like old magazines and put them up digitally to like help archive them. I find that so fascinating, and it's a whole other kind of rabbit hole for us to go down. But just quickly, is there like I saw there was a screenshot of like this is the best console in the world for like the Nintendo, and it was quoted by God or something like that from like it was something random like that. I'd love to know what's like another like obscure random fact that you found in like an old magazine that's just a fun like thing to mention?
Well, the thing at the moment that I've really liked, and the thing which has got me sort of back into the magazine stuff, is that there's a whole bunch of different accounts now, hubs and comfort food video games and Japanese mag scans that are finally have all these Japanese magazines that were out in the 80s and 90s that like we never got, or like if we saw a magazine, if we saw something in like an EGM magazine, it was probably that they just cut it out of a Japanese magazine and then just put it in there. But now we're getting like these really high quality magazines where they actually just had access to the people making the games. So, yep, here's prototype, very early screenshots of this game or that game. And we're still finding, even now with Sonic the Hedgehog, it's like we're finding screenshots from early versions of Sonic 1 or like maybe the Master System, the Game Gear versions of games. It's like we're still finding weird stuff like that. Or even I actually just went through a whole bunch of Spanish magazines. I download all these Spanish magazines because someone's put them up. But like, here's a screenshot of Sonic Triple Trouble on the Game Gear where he's surfing in the first stage, and you don't do that. So how the hell did this one a Brazilian magazine or something in Mexico like have all this stuff? They just had access to it, and then they just didn't care. Wow. But no one spotted it really until now. So now it's just a case of going bit by bit and finding all this weird stuff in there.
Crazy. Wow. Amazing. My favorite like piece of content is like I like old interviews with like old game developers or studio leads about the games that they're putting out and how they think it's revolutionary. I think those are really interesting. But yeah, no, this is really cool, and I love that there's someone out there that is passionate about the stuff. And I had no idea that there were websites that were uploading like old magazines. One thing I did want to do is a call out to anyone listening to this, if they do have like retro magazines that they've like kept in their closets. Ryan might be interested in like taking them. He's got an awesome scanner that he uses to put them in like high res online. So if you do want to kind of make those magazines get preserved, then definitely get in touch with Ryan. I'm sure he would appreciate it. That's kind of all the time we have for today. Actually, one thing I wanted to mention before I forgot. Did you ever see the picture of the butter chicken Sonic that's blue? It's like blue butter chicken. I saw this.
Like a chili, like a Japanese food thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that just looks so gross. Oh, that's the worst.
I don't know why. It's like one of the obscure like Sonic meme, like Sonic IP being used in like food. I think that's
yeah. It's that or the one where they made some sort of deal with Hooters in Japan. It's like, this is not great. I don't like any of this stuff.
Anyway, it's been awesome chatting to you, Ryan. Just about we really kind of went from one like side to another. So talking about game design has been really fun, but even just hearing about your passion for Sonic and just retro games and all the different blogs that you're now managing. If anyone's interested, you can follow Ryan on Twitter at RLAN2, or go to Sonic_Hedgeblog on Twitter, or the website. So other than that, is there any other place that you want people to look at or send if they're really curious about you or any of the stuff that you're doing?
If you wanted to see some of the stuff I've made, go to makesvideogames.com, where I've got just a few sort of dives into the stuff that I've sort of developed at PikPok and Halfbrick and stuff like that.
Awesome. I'll put that in the description down below as well.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Lovely to meet you, and all the best on the future projects that you work on.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube or any other podcasting service. And I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.